boys don't cry. I remember him asking me then, what do big boys do when they're sad? I suppose I didn't answer his question. I told him that he would be a good man when he was grown up and be able to stand up for himself. He had done the right thing, I told him, even though it hurt him that time. Now I think about this, he didn't seem much happier. What should I have said? When he was going to bed, Will tripped on a toy. I remember carrying him. He was trying so hard not to cry. He was so small in my arms. I've never forgotten that feeling. It's most odd what sticks with you. A whole patchwork of memories making up our lives. I took him to bed to read him a story. Sharon kept on buying him books of ghost stories. He always wanted me to read him those, but he never slept properly after, I think. He would never settle properly until I had checked the room for ghosts. I always look carefully to reassure him. I remember that night because I promised him then that I would always be there for him, to protect him regardless of anything. He probably thought I meant about ghosts, but I meant it for everything. It's not the kind of promise you forget. I wasn't reading a new ghost book. I was reading him Grimm's fairy tales. The old stories are much better than these new ones. It was a strange story that night, called The Ungrateful Son. I'll tell it to you, it's only short. Once upon a time, a man and his wife were eating a roast chicken for dinner. When the man saw his father, a very old man, walking along the road towards them, the man didn't want to share, and so he hid the chicken out of sight. The man's father arrived, bid them good day, and continued on his way. The man was happy with himself and told his wife to get the chicken and put it on the table again. But the chicken had transformed into a giant toad, which leapt onto the face of the man. The toad wouldn't leave his face and hissed at the wife when she came near, so she didn't dare approach to help. The man had to feed the toad every day from then on, or it would bite his face, and he never rested for the remainder of his life. Like I say, it was a very strange story. Will was asleep before I finished it, which was probably a good thing. It left me in an odd mood. I wondered how long I would be able to keep him safe. I didn't know where life was going to take him. I was his grandmother, and I hoped I would help him be a good man. I could still see him sleeping there now, like it was only yesterday. I never thought it would be easy, but I had raised James, so I thought I would be ready for anything from my grandson Will. The world changes so quickly. I remember the family visiting me when Will was a teenager. There's a song by Al Martino, "Here in My Heart." That was playing when Robert first kissed me. I listen to it when I'm alone sometimes. After James had grown up, I went to New Zealand to visit distant family over there. It was a very long trip in those days, but it's important to keep in touch. We're all so spread apart in our lives now, don't you think? I started a small collection of glass animals many years ago. I would buy a new one whenever I went to Brighton. It's good to get out of the house, enjoy the fresh sea air. My husband Robert was a writer. Sadly, he died before Will really knew him. He could have gone far if he'd applied himself a bit more. We were all waiting back then for Diana to divorce Charles. It had been such a scandal after that television interview that she did. People seem to believe that all us old folk want to talk about is the weather, so I started the conversation.
I think it's sad. She was bullied into all of this from the beginning.
I could have handled the rest of the conversation better. I lost my temper a bit. Sharon didn't join in, but it wasn't hard to imagine what an American might think of it all. James wasn't much help. He's always held liberal views on things. I wish I hadn't even tried. They didn't want to hear my views. I said that I was going to make some tea. No one offered to help. I felt patronised. I don't think they really wanted tea. I didn't really want it either, but I didn't want to stay in there. It seems like a strange thing to remember, but some things stick with you. Back then, society worked by all getting along. You kept your head down. It's easier to stand up from the crowd now, but, well, I don't think it's right. If you go against society, you always end up in trouble. We didn't have all these choices, and we all turned out well enough. I was used to James, and of course Sharon being difficult, but not Will like that. I was scared for him. He had all these views about things, and it was dangerous. Will was only at the start of his life, but those years are so important. I wanted him to keep his head down, not start arguments. I stood there, waiting for the tea to brew. And I cried for him. He was young, but he was old enough too. He was going to make mistakes, and I wouldn't be able to stop him. I knew something had been broken that day between Will and I. I took a deep breath and pulled myself together. It simply doesn't do to let others see you get upset. I live by myself. I always have done since Robert went. I had felt this was acceptable until then. Feeling distant from your family is the most awful thing. It's the strangest feeling of mourning. My generation has different values. Oh, goodness, I know that. But I very much believe that they are good. I wasn't prepared to accept that Will wasn't going to talk to me anymore. His views, I felt he was putting his future at risk. All these free ideas about people choosing their own way to live, he would understand later. But how much later? But before he changed, what damage would he do to his options?